Hey everybody, this is Steven Sorrentino from the Washington, D.C. International Cinema Festival. I am here with finalists of a really cool movie by the name of Look Where He Brought Me From. And this is Delbra Brown. Hi, Delbra.
Hello. Hi. How are you, Steven?
I'm doing good. So I'm looking at the credits after seeing your movie. It's a documentary, right?
It is.
But it's much more than a documentary because it goes through so many different feels and styles. So it's really, for me, not a documentary. It's a theatrical piece, a documentary. It's got a lot going on.
It does. I tend to do that with my projects, multimedia.
Okay. So how did this start out? So this is obviously a very personal thing because it's a family thing, right?
It is. Yes. Okay.
What was when did this start? When did you first think of it?
30 plus years ago.
But you said you were 20.
I was an infant, but brilliant infant, I must say. But about 30 plus years ago, I actually started in 1974 with Roots. With Roots, being able to see someone actually research their family account and really it was amazing to be able to see how someone went through the transitions of that. So I always knew at one point in time I wanted to figure out what my family story would be.
Right.
So in the 90s or so, I was bored, and I decided to ask my grandmother a couple of questions, just asking her who she was. Some of my family migrated from the South, and many families who migrate from the South to search for a better life don't talk about what happened prior to the migration. So As I began to realize that, I started asking her simple questions, Grandma, how many brothers and sisters you had? She says, well, they say Papa had 26.
Which blew me.
It blew my mind. I'm like, there's 20-something people that look like you. Are you kidding me? It also was a culmination of the oral accounts of her memory, what she remembered about her family. Her mother was 30 years younger than her father. He bought 7 marriage licenses, only married 6 times.
Yeah. What was that about? What happened to the 7th?
Who's all these people? So I'm like, someone actually birthed this many kids, so I'm in my 20s and I'm like, are you kidding me? So this was actually early inceptions of the internet.
Right.
So I taught myself how to use the internet through family research. Back then, 30 plus years ago, it was not in the state that it is now, so much access to information. So it was really a daunting task of just calling people, learning how to speak, ask questions so that people will feel comfortable telling you their personal stuff. So it was a waiting till after 7 o'clock when calling long distance was free, or 10 cents a minute anyway.
How you dating both of them?
There was so much, but so after 30 years of trying to prove her oral accounts, finding these marriage records, figuring out who these people were, you don't want to lose that kind of wealth of knowledge. And I really had a passion that one day I needed to write it down and publish a book. So I had published a few books prior to that. And so finally, during COVID, actually in 2019, I believe it was, I finally said, you know what, I'm going to write this book. And so I wrote the book in third person. I got my inspiration from the Cicely Tyson movie, the documentary that they did, Miss Jane Pittman.
Right.
Seeing someone give an account of past. Being born in the North, I had no correlation or understanding of South. I know Southern drawl. So I really wanted to write something that the family could feel the essence of, as if they were sitting in front of our ancestors and they're telling a story. So the actual book started off as a third person account of the research that I found.
Yeah.
And so after having published the book, I actually, that following year, someone reached out to me, Googling our family name, found me on Facebook, online, I'm everywhere, information about our family. We're still in COVID. Mm-hmm. Everyone's bored, trying to figure out something to do. And I finally just decided I'm going to turn this book into a documentary. And that was really where the idea was birthed. So prior to that, I actually had done a few stage plays that were multimedia faceted.
Okay.
And so very first stage play incorporated audio, movie, stage. It was really cool. And
Yeah.
so I did about maybe 2 more stage plays after that. And so I was able to connect with the Rochester acting community, African Americans, just people in general in the community who had an understanding of the passion that I have giving honor to family,
Sure.
being able to give an account of being healthy kind of thing. So once I finally decided to do this project, scoping it out, trying to figure out locations, it's still COVID, who would allow me the ability to utilize their facility, the cast, trying to entrust their health, their life with being able to come out and just be a part of a project.
And they're singing, and and during COVID, I did 2 commercials.
Absolutely.
So you got away with a lot. God bless, because
I absolutely did. I had 70-year-olds in my church, Mom. This was my grandmother's church, family church. They've been around since 1950s. Having a pastor say, "I will entrust this with you," taking the COVID protocols that were necessary, spraying the church, wiping things down. But we did it. And I couldn't be honored and blessed by having done that. For me, it's not just about an account of my family history. If you haven't watched it, it's really realizing the journey your family goes through from one generation to the next, decades of. They had their own pandemic. They had the Spanish flu, they had syphilis, and so I now was able to understand how they felt going through a pandemic, because we were in our pandemic. So it's being able to understand the journey your ancestors have gone through and honoring that.
It's amazing how when I watched the documentary twice, maybe more, because we have to judge. We have to first see them, then judge, and then of course I wanted to review it because there's a lot of information in this. I saw it as a stage play. And then I didn't. And then again, it's stage play again. And then as a movie, you put, obviously, because I didn't know that about you, that you had done anything as a stage play. I saw it as a person, as an actor and director. I'm like, this is great. This is staged perfectly, So it really lent itself to any kind of style you wanted. And where did you get all the information? The written, everything, as far as everybody's documentation, birthdays, deaths, marriage certificates, unbelievable.
Absolutely. It was, when as African Americans, we don't document our history. So I knew that it's documented somewhere. Yeah. And so to be able to say to someone, who am I? How are we related? I needed to be able to show the family who took an interest, the researchers from this. So doing genealogy, I'm a part of a few people, now that Ancestry is out there, everyone's connecting, everyone's trying to find their roots. This was something I've been doing for 30 plus years. So it's interesting to see it on TV, and all the celebrities are finding a passion and an interest in it. I'm like, we've been doing this 30 plus years. So truly being able to, it really is a faith journey. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know how I'm gonna get there. How do I find this document? How do I prove? So I'd say to people, it was like a 80%, 90% factual story with 10% of my own imagination.
Fine. That's the only way to bridge it together, and grandma's, recollection.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I did funny because I can relate to it. My uncle told me a long time ago that I had a famous cousin. And I remember who the guy he was talking about, but it couldn't have been the same guy. When I was a kid, it was Bruce, his name was. So we actually did the same thing. We went crazy, went to Ellis Island, all of the files and stuff, and found that my great-grandfather came over from Italy on such a date with his little sister, who was then the guy's grandmother. And the guy is Bruce Springsteen, so he's like my second cousin. Oh. And my great-grandfather was wearing this stupid ring, and it's been passed down, so I totally understand it. But we went to Ellis Island and actually looked at the files, and they're available. And my great-grandfather's name is there with his little sister. The date they came, 1915. It's amazing if you really look. And this was before 24andMe or whatever the hell this does. And Ancestry.com, which is another thing. But you went further. You gave addresses, from 100 years ago or more.
You know
Amazing.
what was amazing when, again, I'm doing this via, and there was a website. It was so funny. We had listservs. You would join a listserv, and a listserv would basically, it's almost like a Facebook group. It's a
Yeah.
group of everyone from the same, either last names, the same location, someone. And so you just put a message out there and see if anyone can help you with what you're looking for. So I've had many brick walls. There's many beautiful angels out there that we are supporting each other in a quest to be able to find our family and relations kind of thing. But it absolutely is amazing to be able to, going this journey. I did this project as a documentary because I really wanted people to appreciate, like the title said, look where he brought me from. It's a conversation about the positivity of overcoming through trials and tribulations of life, whatever they are.
Yeah.
And it was also a migration story of being able to see African Americans moving from the South in search of a better life.
Yeah.
And then when I knew my grandma was a part of helping to bring Local 11, a union, to the hospital here. And then my mother was a part of trying to right the wrong for people at a corporation. And then I find out my great-grandmother and my great-great-great-great-grandmother and great-great-grandfather were part of a movement to try to do something positive on behalf of people, reparations. So you say to yourself, I'm amazing, look what I've done. And you're like, no. This is the DNA in me.
I find people were more amazing back then than we tend to be now. We think we're cool now. During the documentary, just going from the South, during the Emancipation era and all that stuff, it goes on and on. And first off, how many grandkids did he have?
I can only tell you there was 26. Well, and you got to remember, people had passed away. This is who people remembered. I think he had like 100 10 children. There were so many more than that, and that was just who they knew. But that was what was in the newspaper at the time. So yeah. And I wrote down everything my grandmother said, because there was always more I wish I had asked. And that generation is so hesitant because there's skeletons in the closet, there's sensitive things. So with them, it's like, how will you treat this information once I give it to you?
Right. Will you honor it, or you're going to
honor it? Yeah. Will you bring shame to? So every project I've ever done, it was always about some secret, some weirdness that occurred in my family, but I'm not the only one who's gone through it. So why not share it? And it's about how we treat that information. So I really saw this as my roots in inspirational story. And there's so many documentaries that are coming out now, biopics.
Yeah.
So that was why I really submitted this. Every one of these kind of projects have to get into the right hands, be with the right people. But I believe everything my family would do is such an amazing story to be told.
Well, the fact that you looked so close into it, and actually you can track people, their lives, their interactions and all that, because of the work that you did, because it would have been lost, really, because grandma would have died, not told the story, no one would have cared, and it just would have been, I don't know, I think we're from somewhere in the South, and that's it.
That's it.
So I have regrets about that with my grandmother, because they came from Italy, and my great grandfather, when I was a kid, he was just some old guy that didn't speak English. Until one point, I always loved silent movies when I was a kid, and he used to love Charlie Chaplin, and we connected through my grandmother interpreting. And then I'm like, this is a real guy. And then I found out where he was from, and why he was married 3 times, and why. And now I wish I would, as an adult, just sit there for days and put him on camera and go, tell me more. And you did in your way, which is beautiful. And I wish I had done that.
I did, absolutely. It's so beautiful to hear how we take that little tidbit of information, and there's something to it. There's something more to it. They may not know, but there's more to that little tidbit of information if we ask, and then if it gets shared. And that's what and all I know is her story was crazy as all outdoors. There was a part in the story where he said, baby, why did you? She went to school and she came back home. And he said, baby, why'd you go to school? Why are you home? And my grandmother literally told the story. I went to school, the teacher wasn't there, so I left. And I didn't go back. And I was like, what? And so that was that little piece. People don't realize these were oral things that she had shared. How do you turn that into a story? How do you make it a part of a bigger picture? And I'm so grateful that I at least did it. If I did nothing else, I did it.
Yeah, you did. And for people that haven't seen the film, first off, see the film. You have to see it. And we're going to have a website up very shortly where we're going to feature all of our finalists and our winners in all of the bi-monthly competition. Okay. You'll be able to see it if the director lets you. First off, I looked at who directed it, who produced it. He did everything.
Believe it or not, I edited it. I chose the music. I did the transitions. Yeah. I did. I'm actually, my background is in IT. Okay. So, I took the journey to learn computers because I said there's something about this thing so long ago, and I'm so grateful I did. So, a project like this, either you have big money, big movie budgets to afford the people who could give you the quality you're looking for, or I just knew that people wouldn't understand the transitions I'm looking for, the heartfelt music that I wanted to put into that particular scene and those kinds of things. So I was just grateful. I just said, I'm really a faith-based person. Lord, give me what I need. And I just have to step out on faith. And that's really what that was.
Well, I call that making a good soup. You put a bunch of stuff in the pot, but the things you put in will really work together. And at the end, it kind of, it meshed together as a beautiful soup. You also changed the medium type. You did sepia tones, and then you did regular color, and then you did different effects, and then cards, almost like silent movie cards. And then there was more live action. Then there was storytelling with a single act story. You did really, you put a lot of ingredients in this soup.
Well, that's what makes it good. That's what makes it.
You know what? Water and a tomato does not make a soup.
At all.
So this was a real church, right? So you used the church singers because everybody sang beautifully, all the hymns.
Well, actually, it's so funny. We just sing. We go to church. You just sing. Real church. Definitely real people. But the cast are literally, on my website, delbra.com. I've done so many things. I literally have been blessed to work with really talented people. And, with theater, they show up, they get on your nerves because they're never ready on point the way you want them to, but they are gifted to bring your story to life. Yeah. And I'm so grateful of the cast that I was blessed to use. And there were scenes where I had my nieces, my nephews, literal family involved, because I wanted them to be able to appreciate what this was about. So I'm so grateful for the people who let me utilize the locations that I was able to use during COVID kinds of things. Many of those dresses I literally sewed, throwing things together. It was, you just got to do what you got to do.
Well, I neglected to remember that you did this during COVID because there's not one hint that was like that. Well, I did a movie, oh God, I don't remember her name. She's a famous actress, director. And we did a movie called, Rich Christmas. I'm the only white guy in the cast, which is cool. It's basically a Christmas movie, and it's, oh God, I don't remember the director's name, but it was during the middle of COVID, and it was a nightmare. And you can almost tell it's like a Lifetime network type of thing. Right. But you can almost tell. With your film, I didn't tell because it seemed very natural. Nobody seemed stiff and weird because we were all stiff and weird during that. So good job.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
A couple of technical questions for you. What was the camera you shot? What did you use?
Oh, so I wasn't the person who actually filmed it. Her name is Nicole Laban, and she's local. She does amazing, what I will say, one-on-one documentaries. Mm-hmm. This being in the movement of film-based, a lot of action. Her very first time shooting something like that. So in the early inception of the film, she was using definitely an iPhone. Mm-hmm. Those are the better quality looking scenes. And then a camera that didn't have audio, of which I had to add something to it. But I worked with my son. My son actually has done many of my projects. His name is Kyron Ashford, Ashford Films. Amazing. And so the very first project he ever did, which is stage play, it's amazing, the quality. So I knew iPhones were amazing. And so she was trying to use different, we literally just used the phone. Literally the whole shot, the whole entire project was shot with the iPhone or another camera, which you can tell the differences in the qualities if you really look. But other than that, I said to her, stick with iPhone. I will be happy.
A film I'm directing, I just producing, we're editing right now. We shot with a red camera and we had 2 reds. It was very expensive and the lenses were 50,000. But you know what? The best footage we got was an iPhone with 4K. And I hate to admit, like, this looks better than a $100,000 rig. So I'm with you, honestly, with the right audio, good shape. The audio, you used chroma key. You also used backgrounds, which was great. Green screen.
Yes.
And church stuff was great.
Very first time. So what happened with the green screen, I knew I wanted to shoot whether someone was talking or whatever the scene was, I knew I wanted a background that resembled the past.
Yeah.
I'm not in film right now. I'm not in Hollywood with big budget. So I knew I needed to capture a background. And so I would call around and ask around, and a few people in the acting community would say to me, the university, they use green screen.
Yeah.
And I said, and I've heard of green screen. You can see a newscaster, they're using green screen. How do I do this? Thank goodness YouTube is out there. So I had software. It was really about learning how to utilize it. And thankfully, because of my technical background, once I figured out how to, and I used different applications. I've used Canva to do many of the transitions. Some of Canva's music, you pay for those services, but it allowed me to be able to be license free. Beautiful. So things that you learn in order for me to promote this and say, no one can challenge it, kind of thing, putting it on YouTube, those kinds of things. So I'm so grateful that I had a desire to just learn computers to be able to get me this far so that I could have done everything that you saw other than filming.
It would have been a very different film if you didn't have a background, because like I said before, you use so many different mediums, so many different looks and styles. You would have just been making a documentary about information rather than an art piece, which I think this movie is.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much.
God bless you in your IT. So tell me about the actor, the first actor, because I think that was very Miss Jane Pittman-ish, storytelling, but in the classic sense, which I love. And Cecily Tyson is one of my favorites in the world. Amazing. Absolutely. So he was great. Who was that?
So that's a gentleman. His name is Doug Curry. He's local, and I love him. I love everyone that's in the project other than family. Love them, but the cast. But Doug, I knew he would hit it out the park. And his schedule was so busy. We're still pre-COVID. January, the world slowly started opening up. And it was about trying to get with him and helping him to understand how to say some of these nicknames or how to be able to orate it in the context that I would feel comfortable and happy with. So I tried to respect the time. Can you here's the reading, read it for me, send me the file. And he literally said, Delbra, this will work better if I'm with you. So he came to my house and we probably shot it in about a couple of hours. I mean, I'm capturing all the audio, beginning to end. Really? Beginning to end. And I never went back and needed any more editing. He hit it out the park. I was sitting right there, he would make his corrections. But he was in the film, of course. He was the older version of my great-grandfather. Yeah. But I wanted it to be someone is telling you this story and the narration. So his name is Doug Curry. And
where is he from?
He's here in Rochester. I don't believe he wasn't born here, but he's right here with me. Everyone in that project is right here in New York.
Right now, we're doing this interview. I'm in the South right now. I'm in Virginia, in rural Virginia. So that accent, even though it's an old accent, he nailed it. You got it right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Because it's a whole different world. If you do a bad Southern accent, it's bad.
I would love to link you with him if you need him. He is amazing. He actually does he has a jazz radio station that he does online, and he just is so willing. He's such a willing worker to be available. I love him. He's just amazing.
Tell me what were the challenges besides COVID? Well, what was the most challenging scene or the most challenging situation, whether it was the research or the filming or what?
The opening scene, that funeral scene. with my family.
Why you want to slap everybody?
I'm trying to get, you know what happened is, oh my gosh, it's dealing with so many generations. Younger generation may not have the heart to care about what you're doing right now. You know, once they get in their 30s, they care more. 40s, they definitely care. My mother was the ride or die person. She, wherever I was, she showed up. And so that's that one older person who was in most of the scenes. But the older ones understood the story, but they didn't know how I would tell it.
Yeah.
So they just showed up for their scene. They did what they could do. I'm so grateful for the community that allowed me to utilize that funeral scene. And then the theatrical company, which is the Pinfield Players, they allowed me to use that little coffin. So it was a collaboration that really brought my story to life. So.
Do you notice that when you use the more people on set, the harder it is to do things because everybody has their own little world?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I did AA scene with a bunch of actors, and I'm like, okay, shut up. You have to stop.
We're ready to get started. Absolutely.
I had a lot of people at like the church, the outside scenes, and all that stuff. We had a lot of people. So bless you for having or patience.
I think I am a person who loves coordinating projects. I literally do. And being able to, how I set it up, how I staged it, was making certain that this is where I need you to be. This is the clothes I need you to have. And I just gave them just a little bit. You should be able to pull this off. Don't worry about whether you need to read it. Because I've worked with them, and you can give them the script 2 months in advance. And they will not read it until the day you need to shoot, and you like pulling your hair out.
As you can see, I've done it. So
you're like, do you understand what this scene is calling for? But
and they'll go, well, yeah.
But they nail it, and that's all. And I've learned to pad about a half hour of you getting ready, another 15 minutes of you understanding what I'm looking for. Then they nail it.
Yeah, and everybody's expression, as you know, some people aren't actors, so they're not in a moment. They're living in that. And if the camera pans and they're not in the moment, your scene is ruined. I didn't see any of that. Everybody seemed to be on the same page. So either you yell loud or they got your script. Either one.
I probably yell out. Well, you know, it helps for the person who is telling the story and the filmmaker. And there were some scenes where she didn't understand the vision I was looking for. It was for me to articulate it with passion and making certain when I walked away, I got the scene I needed, regardless of whether people are on board. The hanging scene. Oh my gosh, that was another one that was a little challenging because he was hung not for something. He was hung because he killed a person that everyone loved in the community. So they were supposed to be cheering. They were supposed to be glad that he was hung, but everyone is thinking that a hanging is somber.
Right.
So they had the sad faces like, no. And so she thought they needed to have sad faces. I said, no. And so they were actually holding copies of the newspapers. Articles for that particular project in that particular scene. So I was trying to get them to be in sync with the scenes, you know.
It is what it is. But I recently directed a film with children. And when it came time to direct the children, it had nothing to do with the story. Because if I try to explain the story, they would go somewhere else. So I just say, okay, let's pretend that it's this. And it worked beautifully. Sometimes even what it does, it's like, okay, this is a really happy scene. Don't even care. Don't let them read the script at all, you know? Because in the story, people did celebrate the fact that this was a bad guy and the town people hung him, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I can't imagine cheering somebody being murdered. However, in that story, that's the real life.
For the purposes reason of the story, yeah. He was cheating with this man's wife, and everyone loved him, so they were just sad, and they wanted the right to be wrong, the wrong to be right.
It's a little rough. I would have rather run him out of town rather than...
Well, that was why the scene captured the last hanging that ever happened.
Right. And again, you use your title cards like silent movies, which is, again, a great idea. because your movie is nearly 2 hours long, almost 2 hours.
The actual is two, but that's because there were some World War II. I felt you get tired of seeing the same storyline coming back at you. So I knew I needed to switch it up. And I said, it's a documentary really for a family. This is a part that I could cut. I struggled with what should I cut?
Yeah.
And I said, it's all too good for me to just chop it up for the sake of people who are not my family. So it's out, and believe it or not, we premiered it in Rochester, we have a Fringe Festival. Mm-hmm. First time I premiered it at a Jiva Theater, a prominent theater here in Rochester. And they sat through the entire time without fail, without issues. My 60s plus and 70-year-old people who came to see this project, no breaks, no interventions. They sat through it and loved it. So
no pee-pee break?
No, not at all.
That says a lot for the film. It really does. Again, you change it up quite a bit. You go theatrical, you go cinematic, then you go, I don't know, then you go true documentary where we're giving facts and figures, real photographs of the era, and even new photographs that look like the era. So you really mixed it up, and that's why it kept people's attention. And at the end, I kind of brought it up to date, and it was nice to see people in today's day and age and talking today. And you use real old people, you can hear it.
Absolutely.
You had to do one thing over, what would it be? Just one thing. Is that a weird question?
The one thing, if I had to do it over, was have more money and make it a real movie. I with what I had for the period, the information I wanted to share, when I walk away, I just need to say I did my best. Yeah. For the level that I'm at, and that's really what I wanted to get out of it. I'm submitting them into these projects, into these film festivals such as yours, because if it stays with me, it goes nowhere. Right. It was really about someone looking at it, seeing it, and saying, like many other documentaries that they are turning into movies, this may be worthy of someone putting some money into it and telling a story. Who knows? Absolutely. So that was really what my gain is out of what I would love to happen. And if it doesn't, it's on Amazon. You can view it at any time. Look where he brought me from. I'm the only movie on Amazon, so I love that. With that title.
Yeah, well, because it's a different title. It's a different title, which is good. Sometimes people, especially filmmakers or creative people, I'm a musician first, I guess, as a songwriter. I knew a lot of guys when I was younger that would want that perfect song. I have to do my camera a little different here, sorry. They would try to keep it continue to write or continue to produce it and continue to add a guitar, continue to add a scene for a movie. And it's never good enough for them because it's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect. Right. But you have to give birth to the child because you cannot carry it for 2 years. So after 9 months, you give birth and then you let it live by itself. You let it grow up, and that's what you did with the film. You didn't say, yeah, but that scene could be better, as many people do, and it never gets seen. So you say, it's not perfect yet. It's never going to be perfect. Scorsese says the same thing. It's never perfect, but what you did is you gave the time and the opportunity for other people to look at it, and maybe somebody from Hollywood or Netflix to go, Delbra, I love this idea. We're going to change the screenplay a little bit. We need your input. How do you think about this as a feature? And then you say, yes, please. And that's that. So it goes from grandma telling you a story to a hit movie. Who knows? I'm waiting for that yes, please moment. But if it never does, I've had people who are familiar with my family local or my grandmother, and they were raised up with her, and they literally have called me and said, you did the thing with that. They can relate to it. They can understand it. I wanted a relatable story that at the end I said may inspire you to want to not just research your story, but tell your story. How do you tell your story? Well, it did that for me in a way. It made me regret that I didn't ask more questions when I was a kid, when my grandparents were all still alive. My father's the only one alive now at this point. So now I'm I'll see him on Sunday. And don't you think I'm not on the camera going, tell us about Uncle whoever, Honestly, I did that. Listen, the way the world is going these days, we're revisiting our mistakes from the past. We're seeing who we are. We're also seeing who we started out being as a society, and maybe this will help us grow into the next generation, which your story does. You know, tell your story. This is what the message is for me, is tell your story, because it's a great story. You gave a lot of information, a lot. Like this 10 book worth of exact dates, exact places, addresses, who lived at 3102, who also lived darn, you know, who was wearing brown shoes at the time. You know? Very impressive. I mean, you really did your work. The filmmaker, historian, good stuff.
Thank you. One of the reasons I'll tell you why I really wanted to do the addresses and all that kind of thing was because during that era, people lived close in proximity to one another. And unlike now, when the census takers come, you don't want to tell them anything.
Right.
Had they not participated, I would not have been able to gather that kind of information. And so it was just important to be able to explain. So if someone says, why did you add this part? There was a reason for all of those things. You know, we live in close proximity to each other. Someone migrated away, and that allowed you to migrate to that place in search of a better life. So all of that really tells a great deal of the African-American story. And that's what I wanted people to feel when they received it. And I'm grateful that you could reflect on what your grandfather said to you, and that kind of thing. It's relatable to everyone. But I really wanted to honor and give honor and respect to our elders. If we did nothing else, it's paying attention and appreciating what our seniors in our lives still can bring and give us for us.
Because we don't do that now. And especially like with young people, and I mentor a lot of people worldwide, young actors and dancers and people creatives. And they're like, how would I know that? I wasn't even born. Well, I like Mozart. I wasn't born then too, but I still like his music. It's about where do we come from? What do we do good? What could we continue to do that we started to do 100, 200 years ago? And also, what could we learn from our mistakes in the past so we don't make them again?
Absolutely.
All of that.
Absolutely.
So tell us, everybody, once more, the name of the film is?
Look Where He Brought Me From.
Look Where He Brought Me From, which is really not, well, look where he brought us from, me, which is very personal. That's what I loved about the movie. It's very personal, but somehow I was you, and I felt like I was part of it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay, so you Washington, D.C. International Cinema Festival, loved your film. You were a finalist in thing. I think you're going to come back with another film soon with us, and we're going to screen you someday, and we're going to go, look where she's come to now.
I hope so. I was trying to work on a documentary, and I just love working with my seasoned people, the over 65, 70 crowd, and they're driving me crazy. So if that'll be another phenomenal story. That one's ties. My uncle is involved in that story, and oh my gosh, that generation is just so difficult. I think I've lost my patience. But
well, get them all around. So we got 30 seconds left. I want to thank you on behalf of everybody here at the Festival of Washington, D.C. You are an awesome filmmaker, storyteller. Delbra Brown, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for appreciating it.
Yeah, we'll see you soon.